reporter who passed away in a car accident at 4:30 in the morning recently. He wrote for Rolling Stone, BuzzFeed. He was also a contributor to the Young Turks. And we've been asking some questions about his death. Obviously, it was strange circumstances. His car, of course, wound up being in a fiery crash. A lot of people have been asking questions. But overall, you have no evidence yet that there's anything amiss other than a terrible, horrible car crash. But now there is some piece of information that we were looking for, and that is significant, that now makes me think that there should be a much wider investigation. And that comes from Richard Clarke. Now, Richard Clarke is a very significant person. He was a former U.S. National Coordinator for Security, Infrastructure Protection, and Counterterrorism. He's the guy who was right about bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. He was in the Clinton administration as a counterterrorism advisor, and then he was in the Bush administration. And he had been telling them, Al-Qaeda is coming. We have to do something. We have to do a principals meeting. We have to get ready. They didn't listen to him, and at times they said, oh, he's got his hair on fire. Turned out he was 100% right. Now, he has voiced some concerns about what could be done to cars remotely. And this is shocking, even if you think that there's nothing untoward in the Michael Hastings story, which is, of course, incredibly possible, right? Even removed from that story, this facts that Richard Clarke is giving us is amazing, and it affects all of us. So what is it? Let me explain. He says, there's reason to believe that intelligence agencies for major powers, including the United States, know how to remotely seize control of a car. Whoa, hold on. We didn't know that. Why is this not the biggest revelation in a long, long time? So, again, putting Hastings' situation aside for a second, so they can seize control of any of our cars? And what if you have, there's 1.5 million people in the intelligence community. I don't know how many of them have access to this kind of power, but I assume not that many, but a decent amount. How about if they got an ex-wife or a guy they hate? They can remotely control your cars? And he continues, what has been revealed as a result of some research at universities is that it's relatively easy to hack your way into the control system of a car and to do such things as cause acceleration when the driver doesn't want acceleration, to throw on brakes when the driver doesn't want the brakes on, to launch an airbag. You can do some really highly destructive things now through hacking a car, and it's not that hard. Now, look, I had read similar things, but it was on some blog somewhere, and I thought, well, maybe yes, maybe no, right? This is Richard Clarke. He was our top counterterrorism advisor. He had every piece of information available to him when he was inside the United States government. He says doing it is easy. We didn't sign on for that. Did you sign on for the government being able to control your car remotely? Who in their right mind would agree to that? It gets even scarier. He says, so if there were a cyber attack on the car, and I'm not saying there was, I think whoever did it would probably get away with it. Now, if you thought the rest of it was bad, it turns out it's incredibly easy to get away with it, almost impossible to detect. Why is the whole country not talking about this? Is Richard Clarke wrong? If he is, I'd like to see 10 other guys counter him on it. If he's not wrong, okay, they can destroy any of our cars, whoever they are. I'm not saying it's Obama. I'm not saying it's the government. I'm not saying it's the FBI. But obviously, some people can do it. They have this enormous power, and you can't detect it. All right, continuing. He says, I'm not a conspiracy guy. In fact, I spent most of my life knocking down conspiracy theories. But my rule has always been you don't knock down a conspiracy theory until you can prove it wrong. And in the case of Michael Hastings, so he is specifically talking about this case. In the case of Michael Hastings, what evidence is available publicly is consistent with a car cyber attack. And the problem with that is you can't prove it. CNN. Now, he's a contributor to the Young Turks on Current. And he went and brought his particular brand of ass-kicking to Piers Morgan's show. Let's see how that turned out.
Essentially, the media has played a role in protecting David Petraeus and promoting David Petraeus and mythologizing David Petraeus. And we saw it here tonight. General Kimmett, who was a spokesperson in Baghdad, who was a roommate of Petraeus, who was involved in one of the biggest debacles in recent foreign policy history, is on TV, defending David Petraeus without actually addressing the real problems with David Petraeus' record. A number of other journalists who were actually covering David Petraeus were raising those concerns. You might not get that from someone like Barbara Starr at CNN, who essentially is a spokesperson for the Pentagon in many ways.
Oh, damn. He's hitting those two guys on his left and right, or both generals, including General Kimmett, the guy he was talking about, is on the left. And they're both like stone cold, like, what is happening? We're on television. Nobody's giving us oral. I don't get this guy he seems to be against us. That's really weird. I'm unfamiliar with this. So, of course, Piers is going to jump in and defend the CNN reporter that Michael Hastings was talking about there at the end.
Okay, well, Barbara's not a spokesperson for him, obviously. But let's move to Lieutenant Colonel.
Not too obviously. I've followed her coverage pretty closely, as she's covered my work before too.
Well, just because she's written naughty things about you doesn't make her a spokesperson.
No, what makes her a spokesperson is repeating without question a lot of Pentagon claims.
Look, there's very few journalists left in this country, and Michael Hastings is one of them. And he writes unflinchingly about the Pentagon. And when he did about General Stanley McChrystal, and Stanley McChrystal had to step down because of the piece that Michael Hastings wrote, which was totally true. And in fact, that's what cost him the job. McChrystal had been saying terrible things about the Obama administration and was disregarding the orders that they were giving him, which is not what you're supposed to do. Obviously, it's an enormous, enormous breach, right? So when he does that, the rest of the press flip out. They're like, what are you doing? You're breaking the rules. The rules are the Pentagon gives us a press statement, we read it on CNN, and then we give a sharp salute. How dare you do journalism? You know what they're calling Michael Hastings now, the rest of the press? A provocateur. How could you possibly provoke the government when instead we're supposed to be stroking them? Hastings ain't done with them yet. One more.
I've been in Baghdad for the last 2 weeks. It is a much different place than it was when David Petraeus took over there. There is calm.
General Kimmett was the spokesperson in 2004, lying to the American people every day.
Okay,
in 2006, he said there was progress in Iraq. I was in Iraq there, man.
Michael,
don't try to spin. You guys are letting him spin.
Let him have his say, please.
Okay.
Listen, I was over there as a private businessman. I've been going in there for the last 9 years, both in uniform and as a State Department official, and now as a private individual.
Oh, well, then I really trust you because you're making money off of it. And Michael pointed that out later in the segment, too. Man, they were not happy with the damage that Hastings did on CNN last night. He's like, so you're making money off the dealings that you have in Iraq now after you were a general in Iraq for us. Huh. Funny how that works out, right? It's so easy to call them on their bullshit. It's just